there's a formula to it. A very simple formula. Everybody's a suspect. It's a statement on modern society. Ooh, ain't modern society awful?
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Welcome back to the Cabin Night Podcast. I'm Rob.
I'm Jake.
I'm James.
This episode we are going to do something we've done before, although we're going to do a bit of a mixture on this one. So we're doing some ghost stories, wherever they come from, whether it be Reddit or personal experiences or books or stories we've heard. Yeah, any of them. But before we get there, I'd like to invite you to grab a drink, make yourself comfortable and enjoy the discussion. Ghost stories. We all did some good ones.
Can I go first?
Yeah, you got.
Why not?
So mine's not a personal one, but it's one that myself and you, Rob, we attended a ghost walk recently in Graves Park in Sheffield, which is a very old piece of land that was gifted to Sheffield some years ago, many years ago.
Spooky.
Yeah, that's creepy, right? But one of the ones that we heard on this walk stuck with me because it is pretty unpleasant, and it was when we got back to the entrance to the animal park, which is also sort of is side by side with Bunting Nook, which we've discussed already in a previous ghost episode, and the story is as follows. So it's a relatively recent story because it involved cars and people giving verbal accounts of it rather than it, hearsay or whatever. Not that band. That shit.
Oh, okay. Well, the window.
Pure and simple. So the story goes, late one evening, a woman was driving home with her young boy, and they stopped at the traffic lights just outside, just at the end of Bunting Nook and the animal park.
Emsworth Road, is it?
Emsworth Road, yeah,
Emsworth,
that's what it's
yeah.
called. And the little boy looked out towards Bunting Nook, and there's a tree that sort of divides the entrance to the animal park and Bunting Nook. And the little boy looked out of his window and pointed up into the tree and said, "Look, Mummy, there's a boy in that tree," which in itself is pretty unpleasant.
Yeah.
Not very good, really. It's not
Down.
a good start. So this mother looks out at window and doesn't see anything. Thinks he's, overactive imagination, imaginary friend and whatever. She's looking, she's like, "I can't see anything. I think you're just being silly." And the little boy just goes, he's not up there anymore. He's sat next to me in the car." So, mother completely passes it off, as I've said already, overactive imagination, and they drive home. This kid starts talking more and more about this little boy who's his friend now, and they do everything together and play and what have you. And it gets to the school week, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Do you remember the story in that? Yeah. So they got to the start of school week, and throughout the weekend she'd been sort of disregarding it all as just kids being kids. But then she started noticing things like, train set was in a different position to what the kid left it, and things were moving on their own, and the usual. Anyway, it got to the school week, and I can't remember exactly how the story went for this. Did she think? Oh, so she took the little boy to school.
Yeah,
and
nothing happened until the boy went to school.
And then when the boy went to school, she started noticing what you would probably only describe as like violent poltergeist activity, really, like things smashing. Essentially like something were having a tantrum. And it sort of got worse every single day as this boy went to school, until the Friday when this woman claimed that she took the boy to school, got back and was physically attacked herself, felt something, knocked her to the floor and tried choking her, physically hurting her. So that night when boy got home from school, that afternoon rather, she'd made a decision already, hadn't she, by this point, to be like, right, we need to end this, essentially. Something's wrong here. And she says to the little boy, "Tell your friend we're going for a drive. We're going for a drive. Tell him to get in car." "Yeah, he's in car next to me, Mummy." Off they set, up to Bunting Nook. "Right, we're going to go for a walk," she tells the boy. The boy's in a car seat, so he can't get himself out. "So you tell your friend to get out, and then I'll come round and let you out, and we'll go for a walk, all three of us. We'll all go together." "Is he out at car yet, your friend?" Yeah, he's waiting next to the car." Foot down, off she went, and was fine ever since.
Wow.
Everything stopped, just like that. And it was interesting that I can't remember exactly what he said, but the guy who was our tour guide, he said Adrian Finney, he'd said that he'd heard that himself. He'd had that story passed on to himself, but they had also spoken to somebody else who'd had something similar happen.
Okay.
So if you're ever driving by End of Bunting's Nook and you stop at them red lights and you've got a kid in back of the car, don't ever look at that tree on dividing boundary between the two.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, don't ever do it, because if that kid sees you, or rather if your kid sees the boy in the tree, he's coming home with you.
That's not pleasant.
Nice.
I've got a couple of sort of them 2-sentence, 3
Oh,
sentence.
yeah.
Go on then. I like these.
Hang on. I've just read this one to James. It's not so much a ghost story, but it's quite creepy. I can't move, breathe, speak, or hear, and it's so dark all the time. If I knew it would be this lonely, I would have been cremated.
It's a horrible idea, isn't it? That is that. And I remember talking to my brother about it, and he'd said as well, you know, a lot of people are so quick to say they'd be cremated, but what if you're sort of aware when it's happening? I'd still rather be cremated, I think.
I don't know. For years I said I want to be buried, but I think now I think like, yeah, cremated, scatter my ashes somewhere. You know, I'm done with it.
To Field in Derby, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
If we were buried, we have to make sure that we were buried with a police megaphone so that you could shout and alert nearby graveyard workers.
That either makes lots of sense or absolutely none. You will find out.
No contest.
After struggling desperately to move any part of his paralytic body, just to alert the doctors that he was conscious before they made the first incision, he was relieved to see that one of the nurses had noticed his pupils dilating from the bright light. She leaned in close, in a whisper that tickled his ear, said, "You think we don't know you're awake?"
Okay, I've got a Reddit one.
Okay.
Go for a Reddit one.
Go for Reddit one.
Okay. A few years ago, this is Dig Stores, Reddit.com user Dig Stores. A few years ago, I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Melbourne, Australia. It was my first time living on my own. The apartment block had been built in the 1930s. I'd been there for a few months when I came home from work one day and went into the bathroom. I saw something strange. I'm looking in the mirror. A wooden board which had covered a hole in the ceiling that led to a small attic space. I don't like where this is going.
No, I don't like it already. Yeah.
It lay fractured in 2 pieces on the floor. I examined the pieces. The board was an inch thick and it would have taken Bruce Lee to break it. I thought the landlord had sent someone to work on the attic. I was frozen stiff with fear. Someone is up there for sure, I thought. I emailed pictures to the landlord asking if anyone had been there, with an undertone of annoyance since she hadn't warned me. Her reply read, "Please call me as soon as you are able to." Not good. I called and she explained that her last 2 tenants had said the same thing had happened to them. She promised to replace the board, and she did. A month later, I woke up one night around 4 a.m. My body was covered in goosebumps. It felt like someone was rubbing his or her hands on me. Everything kinky. Everything was silent, but then I heard a dragging sound coming from above my bed. It was as if someone was pulling a sack of potatoes. Odd analogy. I froze, convinced someone was up there. There is no way an animal could make that sound. After 5 minutes, I worked up the courage to turn on the light, armed myself with a cricket bat, and walked to the bathroom. That's when I saw that the new board covering the hole was broken in 2. I felt sick. The dragging sound had stopped, but I heard something else. Whispering. The sound was clear and coming from the attic above my head. It sounded like children's voices, and I could hear one sentence repeated over and over. "It's your turn. It's your turn."
Oh, that's all.
I switched on every light in the apartment to make things feel normal. It was 5 a.m. and dark outside. I watched TV to try and unwind. Then a fuse blew. My pet budgie Dexter, whom I kept in the kitchen, usually never made a sound at night, but he started squawking like he was being strangled. I'd never heard him make those sorts of noises. He was screaming. I grabbed my car keys, ran out, sat in my car and waited there until the sun came up. When I saw people walking their dogs, this comforted me enough to go back in. The front door was open, but I figured I might have forgotten to close it when I ran out. I went into the kitchen to check on Dexter, but he wasn't in his cage. I felt sick again. All my windows were closed, so I looked everywhere inside. When I walked to the bathroom, I heard splashing. Dexter was half drowned in the toilet. Shit. I took him out, washed him and dried him. I was so confused. At 8 a.m, I called the landlord and gave her a watered-down version of the night. "Wow, you heard the whispering too," she said. I stayed in that apartment for another 18 months. I heard the whispering on a few occasions, and twice the board covering the hole in the ceiling moved. Although I live elsewhere now, the landlord recently called. She said that her new tenants had begged to speak with me about some of the stuff that's been going on there. Forget it. It's their problem now.
He stayed there for 18
18
months.
months.
I was going to say 18 days. Fucking
18 hours.
Fucking hell. Oh, that's horrible, that one. Jesus. Well, mine are from a book. I have a book called Haunted Sheffield, which is by Mr. and Mrs. P. Dreadful.
I think that's probably a stage name, though, isn't it?
I think so.
Pen name.
I believe they're real names. They wouldn't sell me a lie, surely. But the book is a collection of ghost stories and not so much as spooky as that, but more sort of the history behind locations and the history of ghosts in that location. So I'm going to be picking some choice extracts from around Sheffield city centre. Again, Sheffield is the city where we live. It's obviously relevant to us, and we know quite a lot of our viewers, listeners, them as well. Well, if you're on YouTube, I suppose you're a viewer. But they will know or have heard of these areas as well. So I shall start with a short one. I shall just do one for now. And that is Chapel Walk, which is a famous alley of shops in Sheffield. This street is included here because of the many former city residents who now lie just 2 feet below its pavement. Chapel Walk is a survivor of ancient Sheffield. The pattern of the streets have changed over time, but the ground underneath here has more bodies buried under it than any other piece of ground in the city centre. The bodies that lay under the road date back to the earliest settlement and the establishment of the cathedral. No ghosts have actually been spotted here. There have been some unsubstantiated tales of people being grabbed by the ankles as they walk down there at night. We await more reports, so until then, it may just be a piece of historical whimsy. No, I thought the Chapel Walk one was interesting just because there's so many bodies under there. So it's
I
quite.
seem to remember because on that the ghost walk we did, they talked about what is the Doc Martens store now.
Oh, is it a tanning place or something?
Yeah. Something like that.
By that I mean leather tanning, not sunbeds.
Somewhere where you might need a confidential CIA file.
It's been watching me for hours now. Sometimes I catch glimpses of its reflection on the computer screen, but I dare not turn around.
I like that.
Why is it John?
Yeah.
Okay, I suspect when I tell you the title of this one I'm about to read, you'll probably find the title scarier than the story itself. But here we go. The Boy with No Eyes. One night when I was 10, I was woken up by my bedroom door opening, followed by someone sitting on my bed. Reddit.com user KMendo4 recalls of a childhood brush with a very persistent ghostly apparition. I felt my leg grazed and the bed sink under a person's weight. It's just Mom, I thought, and I opened my eyes. It was not Mom. I found an eyeless boy. He had black, empty sockets about my age sitting at the foot of my bed. He extended his hand and in it was a little box. I was startled but reached out. He pulled back. I reached again and said, "Give it." Then I blinked, and when I reopened my eyes, he was gone. But I could still see the imprint where he'd sat on my bed. Fast forward 5 years. My girlfriend came over to do homework. After she finished, she took a nap while she waited for her parents. When they arrived, I tried waking her up. She opened her eyes suddenly, looking up at a corner where the wall met the ceiling. She pointed there and went back to sleep. I shook her again. She came to full consciousness, and I explained what she'd done. She looked haunted. Up on the wall, I saw a little boy with no eyes. He was there, staring at me. I freaked out and told her my story about the same kid. Fast forward another 5 years, I was with the same girlfriend and we have a 2-year-old. We were living in my parents' house in my old room. My daughter started waking up at the same time every night and she'd talk. After a while I noticed that she had almost the same conversation every night. I playfully asked her once whom she was talking to. She said, "It's a little boy, he's nice. He's lost and looking for his mummy." My daughter's nightly conversations continued until we got our own place.
Yeah, big nope. Big nope.
Kids are scary.
Terrifying, aren't they?
This is one from Reddit from user lazy_design_5962.
Catchy.
Exactly, you remember that one?
Rolls
won't
off the tongue.
Yeah.
My grandmother has always been different. I remember stories my mum would tell us about her childhood and how difficult her upbringing was. I've always pitied her for it. She's such a fantastic mum. She can't help but wish she could have had the mum she deserved. Ever since she'd got on the call about my grandmother's dementia getting worse, she's been living with us. We were all hesitant about her coming to stay. We'd been told horror stories our whole lives. Mum reassured us that it was only temporary and that everyone deserved a second chance. I couldn't help but despise her for all she did to my mum. What other person would be the sole caregiver of an abusive mother they vowed to leave? It's been about a week since Grandma moved in, and I can't help but think something is clinically wrong with her. It never fails that every night, around 3 in the morning, she begins pacing the halls. I can hear her, her long white nightgown brushing the floor, almost as if she were floating in the halls. The brushing comes to a halt, and I hope that she finally made her way back to bed. Dear God, won't be like the previous one. I hear my door creak open, and I'm dreadfully reminded that it is. I keep telling myself not to roll over and look, but I always do. She's watching me behind the door, peeking behind. I'm suddenly paralysed with fear. If you could see James's face.
Oh, this is unpleasant. This is unpleasant.
I'm suddenly paralysed with fear. This never fails. Her eyes are always empty, and they seem to never blink. The smile that she manages to create creeps from ear to ear. It feels clinical, evil. I finally managed to fall asleep and wake up to find her gone. This morning was different. My mum had run to the market and wants me to watch Grandma for an hour. I'm terrified of her. She's an empty vessel. My mum looks exhausted and she hasn't been sleeping. I know she could really use my help. I hesitantly agree. That was 15 minutes ago. I'm writing this post from the bathroom. Now I'm sitting in the bathroom, stalling. I'm afraid to be alone with her. She's an old lady that just sleeps. How much watching could she require? I know I'm going to have to leave eventually, but I feel safe for now. I decide to play Candy Crush until I hear creaking come from the closet in the bathroom. That feeling, the same one I had the night before, runs down my spleen.
Spleen?
I look up to find my grandmother.
Oh, I feel it in my kidneys, this one.
I look up to find my grandmother peering behind the closet door with the same snarly smile. This time, I fight the feeling wanting to freeze, of wanting to fall asleep to make it go away. I run. I ran straight to the living room, stopping for breath. I feel my heart pounding out of my chest, the adrenaline rushing through my veins. I turn around to find my grandmother sitting in the rocking chair in the living room, right where I left her.
Ooh. Ooh. That's not nice.
I've got a personal one, but if you...
I just thought I'd quickly do this one. So again from the book. This is about the Central Library. I thought Rob would appreciate this because I know how much he likes library ghosts.
Yep.
Okay. So the Central Library on Surrey Street in Sheffield. This building is Sheffield's one and only piece of Art Deco monumentalist architecture. It was built in 1924-25 and was completed on the old site of the medical school, which used to house mortuary slabs that are now in residence at the Wicker Herbal. The following story was given to us as we walked the Steel City Ghost Tour last year by a woman who works in the Central Library in the stacks below street level where the mortuary used to be. She described to us the lower stacks where old documents are locked and locked sections are kept. She often works alone down there and is quite used to peace and quiet, but this experience has made her nervous of being down there alone. She'd been restacking a shelf at chest height when she felt something touch her skirt. Thinking she'd knocked a book loose, she looked down to see a pale arm reaching out at her through the solid books. The hand was opening and closing in supplication, and she watched in stunned silence while the hand twitched and shuddered on the arm and then fell limp, fading out, leaving the bookcase as it had been before. Shocked.
Really?
Yeah. Shocked, she stood in silence for a little while, then moved away from the area, still keeping her eyes on the place where the arm had appeared. The arm has never appeared again, but there have been reports of sounds like a dying breath heard in the stacks below the main library, and many staff members now go below in pairs. Perhaps the ghost is that of a man brought into the medical school for dissection, who was not quite dead yet. It is thought that this was not an uncommon occurrence in the days when corpses were brought for research, with not too many questions asked about their origins. Some of these unfortunates were opened on the cold marble slab, only to die under the mortician's scalpel. Perhaps the library staff are still feeling their presence of a victim of this nefarious practice today. Unpleasant.
Because I seem to remember that when we did the ghost tour, there was some sort of crossover between that and Graduate, weren't there? With that being a...
The Graduate was meant to be a
Masonic Lodge.
And you can, to be fair, you can see the
symbol.
Masonic symbols on the thing. And the wicker herbal they're talking about, you can see the giant window where they had to get the marble slab up into, if you look at it, because that's how the only way they could get it in or out.
Was that is right where Becky was sick, isn't it? When he was telling us that story.
Well, we could see it. We were just outside the town hall, but
Yeah, we're outside town hall. It was telling us the story of Wicker Herbal, weren't it? Yeah, and that slab. Yeah, and then Becky just decided to throw up. She was.
I don't think she just decided. Nope, time to throw up.
She was very, very early stages pregnant with
Zachary at that point, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, so personal one. And I was saying to Rob on the way here today, I can't remember if I've mentioned this one in some way before, but when I was born into a house on an estate, not a particularly pleasant estate now, but it was, that's where I lived until I was, I don't remember living there, so like I said, this is all word of mouth from my mum and dad. The house in question, every single night, I think, I can't remember the time, 7:20 or 9, it was one of the two, my mum and dad could hear a newborn baby crying. And they'd come up and check on me and check on Joe, who wasn't a newborn at that point, but come and check on me to find us bang out, fast asleep, no issue.
You definitely mentioned this. I don't know if you mentioned
same
it
time every night. And it got like quite intense at one point, to the point that when my Auntie Barbara had come to look after us one night when my mum and dad went out, she'd heard it as well. My mum and dad having told my Auntie Barbara nothing about this, incidentally. And she went, "No, our kids," sort of thing. Fine, I thought one of them had woken up, but I went up and checked and they were absolutely fine, but I heard crying. I thought it was Jake. And it was not me. It was not I. It was a young baby crying. But that same house, they got them old fires that you had to like click them to turn them on.
Yeah.
And they got the grills on the front and them. They used to pull in that same house. They used to pull the sofa around so it were right in front of that and watch telly with the heater there. And my mum had got up and went to the toilet or to the kitchen. I can't remember what. And while my dad was sat there, he thought my mum was walking back in. It weren't my mum, it were a little boy that walked into the room and behind the sofa. And then when they looked, like when he got up to look what had happened, this boy was nowhere to be seen. So,
that's
unpleasant, that one.
Yeah, it's very unpleasant.
And I always remember at a very young age saying, like, how did you know it were a ghost? Like, what did it look like? Were it like pale or like transparent or whatever? So he said it just looked like a boy had walked in, as clear as day, like colour, full colour vision and all that. Just walked
Not
in,
black and white.
walked in, looked at my dad and walked behind the settee.
To be fair, most people look at your dad and walk behind the settee, wouldn't they?
We've had one recently, actually, realise.
Really?
Yeah, Emma phoned me Friday. I took Phoebe to school.
Very recent then.
Yeah.
Took Phoebe to school, and I'd only got to Springs, so I dropped Phoebe up at Gleedless, and I'd only got up to Springs Leisure Centre, and Emma rang me. Elisha's playing ID Boo. Okay, that's fine. I'm sat. So we've got an easel, a whiteboard easel that Phoebe had, like a thing, it's got chalk on one side and a whiteboard on the other side, and you can click paper to it and paint on it. So Emma's got this out for him, and she sat to the left of it, and he's with ID Boo to the right. We don't know who or why or what, but he's playing ID Boo to the right hand side of this thing.
Let's just hope he's just an idiot.
Yeah, so.
Yes, that's the best case scenario. He's an idiot.
Your father was a jelly bean too.
Oh, what's that?
Red Dwarf.
Red Dwarf, yeah. Would we like another tale from the book?
I've got another Reddit one ready when you are.
I've got a book full. Some of them are a bit too long to read on here. I would recommend, here we are, book recommendation. I think you can find it in your local Waterstones, if you're local to Sheffield. You can find this book, or similar ones in any other places you may be. This one I quite like. This is Castle Square, but it's more about what used to be at Castle Square. This is actually about the Hole in the Road. So the Hole in the Road, people know from Sheffield, the Hole in the Road used to be basically an underground little shopping centre. People could get there from sort of streets would go down and underneath and things like that, and it was literally a hole in the road. We're not very imaginative when it comes to naming things. It does what it says on the tin. It was a hole in the road, and there was a third.
And that's what we called it.
That's what it was. Orlint Road, if you've actually dropped it.
Orlint Road.
Orlint, yeah, that as well. Oh, just dropped my page. Where'd that one go?
Well, James finds his page again. Me and Rob will do a duet.
Beautiful.
Well, I've got a very short one for you while James finds his page.
Oh, go on then.
The longer I wore it, the more it grew on me. She had such pretty skin.
Yeah, I like that one.
It reminds me of that one we did on the last one. It's like a little girl came up to me and said, "Daddy, I'm 4," and held up 4 fingers.
Yeah.
It's 7 o'clock in the morning. She still won't tell us where she found them.
Oh, my favourite one from last time wasn't it even. It wasn't
It was
even.
the dog. Where's it? The puppy with no.
Oh no! The
boy
one.
with no hands.
No, I was thinking about the one when he walking past an asylum and we were going like
Oh,
15.
yeah.
15.
11.
That's it. I like that. It wasn't a ghost job. I thought it was quite funny.
No, your reaction to the.
Oh, that was
no
my reaction as I read it. So, yeah. To know what we're talking about, listen to our previous episode on ghost stories. So, like I said, this one is about the old hole in the road. Now, this is something that many people may not realise, but the old hole in the road, where Fitzallen Square tram stop is today, used to have a GT News shop underneath the Banker's Draft. The ghost that haunts here was a useful one. She would clean up the background with the newsagents.
Castle Square.
It says.
Definitely weren't Fitzallen Square, where Orlint Road were.
No, in fact, you're right. I've read that, and the picture they've got is of Castle Square, with the Banker's Draft behind it. So, yeah,
Castle Square.
Castle Square. There, under the Banker's Draft. But where was I? So the ghost that haunts here was a useful one. She would clean up the back room with the newsagents, leaving a pile of dirt to be swept up in the morning by the first person to come in. But it was her method of communication that set her out from so many others. Leading into the old basement was a telephone wire that used to run from the old-fashioned black phone. One day, it was brought out of the cellar and left on the shelf next to the cash register as a talking piece for the customers. The wire was disconnected as far as everyone knew, and it was surprised them that one day it started ringing. I'll read that again. The wire was disconnected as far as everyone knew, and it surprised them one day by ringing at the end of a day's trade.
You've told this story before.
I have, but I got the details wrong, so I'm reading this.
Update.
I actually
Edit.
I believe I actually got 2 stories muddled in for the same place, but I got 2 stories muddled together. Picking up the phone, the assistant heard a woman's voice on the other end of it talking in a broad Sheffield accent. She wasn't waiting to be answered.
Hey up, love.
Fuck a duck. There's no quote of what she actually said. We can only assume at this stage. She wasn't waiting to be answered. She just kept on telling them what she was doing and what her life was like. Thinking they had a cross line, they put down the phone. But the thing happened again the next week, and they decided to check the line out. They were told that the phone line was definitely disconnected, and as such, it couldn't be ringing, let alone have someone speaking on the other end of it. The calls to this phone and the woman's voice carried on until the closure of the hole in the road in the early part of the 1990s, although her last call did at least let them see who they'd been listening to after all these years of contact. When the shop was closing down, they had 4 spinner card racks in the front window displaying what they had left to sell. When they were shutting up in the last week of trading, they had moved the card racks from the window, and what they saw was an old charwoman sitting with a pot of tea along with a tin mug at a card table. She just smiled at them both, faded away, as if she knew it was her time to stop work and give up the ghost. The strange sequel to this is that she might still be trying to communicate by phone. The hole in the road may have been fixed, but the spirit of the old child lady could now be using the first phone box just up from the tram stop. How do I know? My wife has answered, not my wife, the wife of this. My wife has answered the phone when passing and heard it ringing. The sound, she says, just was like a cross wire, scratchy and with old echoes on it. The woman on the other end just kept talking about work and what she was doing in a broad Sheffield accent. Maybe she was a woman who cleaned the building next to Cochrane's nearby. Both buildings were destroyed in the Blitz on the 12th of December 1940. Taking shelter under the building in the cellars, she was killed while waiting to phone someone and tell them she was safe and not to worry.
That's good. I like it, but I'm still confused as to the location of the Orlint Road. I thought the Orlint Road was the roundabout where the roundabout is like at top of Moor. You know.
Oh no. Oh, I know what you're thinking. There used to be an underpass there.
Did you be underpass?
There's not. I wasn't holding. No, that wasn't.
No, there was an underpass like near McDonald's, weren't there? I remember that. Where was the Orlint Road then?
Oh, by Castle Square.
Near Banker's Draft.
Yeah, it goes back near Banker's Draft. Where the,
TJUs.
yeah,
TJUs and all that bit.
I would show you a picture, but you wouldn't recognise half because half Sheffield's changed since then. But yeah,
I've for up to this point in my life thought the Orlint Road was you could see old fire station.
no.
Mummy, the man at the top of the man at the top of the stairs says you should leave.
Nice. So you could see Arundel Gate from Welling Road.
Well, it was Arundel Gate on that road.
Well, not
blown my
really.
mind.
It's a bit too. It's a bit too far. It's more.
No, you can't.
Can you? We got a picture.
Yeah. There's the alley that you walk down from Tramstop.
Yeah.
Roxy.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. Yeah. So there you go. We've blown your little mind.
I've been in the hall many times. Okay, I've got a story now, and it's not a personal one. It's hearsay, but it's something that I was told by somebody who was there, and it's a horror story. Absolutely a horror story, but it's not supernatural.
No. Okay.
So something for a little bit of variety for the listeners. So this is a horrendous experience passed on to me from someone who attended this particular training course with the woman who it happened to. So I used to work for a pub chain, a relatively well-known, a very well-known pub chain.
You don't have to, but you don't work for them anymore. You can say what they are.
Wetherspoons.
Oh, I thought it was Sam Smith, but all right.
Anyway, so this woman I used to work with, Kat, she was the Kat. She was the kitchen manager one of the kitchen managers when I worked in Camden, and she'd attended a training course with the kitchen manager from the Banker's Draft here in Sheffield, and this woman told her this story. So the story goes as this: it was delivery day in the kitchen, so they got all the chilled stuff, and a lot of the stuff they'd run out of, so it were being taken out of the packaging it had been brought in and put straight into fridges or whatever. And I don't know what it were they were opening, but they were opening a box of something. And she got a new girl on with her. This kitchen manager, she got a new girl working with her, and she was just telling her about how things done and what we do with, in terms of like date rotation and all that sort of thing. And this young girl was opening one of the boxes with a steak knife. Here we go. You start seeing where this is going. Now, normally, if I'm ever opening something with something sharp, I would have the box sideways to me, horizontal to me, and go that way. This girl wasn't doing that. This new girl, she got the steak knife in the box and was opening it away from herself towards the kitchen manager, who was stood on the other side of the box. So she got to end up box, and the blade jammed. So she's getting it put a bit more weight behind it, and it's flicked up and hit the kitchen manager in the face.
Oh!
Caught the kitchen manager right in the face. Now, it hurt her, but instantly adrenaline kicked in, and she weren't quite aware that of the severity of the damage that had been done. So she could feel something wet on her face, so she thought she'd been cut on her cheek and what have you. So she went instantly to the toilet to clean her face and what have you. It weren't blood on her face. It was jelly from her eye.
Oh!
Caught her in eye, and there was jelly leaking down her cheek. Eyeball jelly.
Ooh.
Oh, that's grim. Oh, that's so grim.
Oh, nice.
What happened?
Blind in one eye.
She's so they couldn't.
Yeah, couldn't do it.
You couldn't
She
just get-
stuck a steak knife through the eye, James.
Well, they
She's
just-
blind.
Well, jelly count. I was get some Robinsons from Sainsbury's. Just got to jam it back in.
Just stuff it back.
Just don't put any boiling water on it.
So she's
that's-
blind in one eye.
Oh, that's horrible.
She just took a steak knife to the eye, and
Does the eye still haunt there to this day? Does this floating eye?
it's a horror story. It's not a supernatural story. It's a horror story.
Apparently, this is the shortest horror story, which was originally published in 1948.
Boris Johnson.
It was written by Frederick Brown and consists of 2 sentences. It reads, "The last man on earth sat alone in a room. There was a knock at the door."
I've heard that one before.
And that's apparently one of the oldest ones.
I shall tell one more story from the book. It's of quite a historic building of Sheffield. It's a place where Jake has been for a ghost hunt. It is of the old fire station museum down in West
I
Bar.
want to do that one.
It's good. That's where we did it with Peter. I was telling you.
Oh, is it? Oh, I didn't know that. So, the old fire station museum, which is exactly as it sounds. It's been all sorts over the years, but I'm sure this preceding paragraph will enlighten us. So, this building was constructed in 1897 and was a purpose-built centre housing the police station, fire station and ambulance services for Sheffield. It had a checkered history and was finally given retirement status in 1965. The beautiful building was then left empty until 1968, after which it was occupied by a variety of companies, including Paradise Hotel Limited and finally Harrison Office Supplies, who use it as a warehouse. After they moved out, the building became derelict and was in serious need of repair by the time the South Yorkshire Fire Service Historical Society took it over. In 1984, they began work to turn it into a museum, which now displays items from the service's history covering a period from 1794 to the present day. It opens to schools and parties by appointment in the week, but the general public can see exhibitions every Sunday, where you can now see the old police cells, the stables that house the horses that pulled the fire wagons, old equipment, and, if you're lucky, the ghost that inhabits the fire station. It could be that when this book was written, they were the opening times. I believe they're actually quite different. I think it's open Saturday and Sunday now, and some days during the week. The ghost in question isn't the lady from the music hall next door. That's a different story that I've not read. But one of the old firemen, still apparently waiting his call to a fire, dressed in a Victorian uniform. It looks like a sailor, and people often ask the volunteer staff why they have a sailor dummy in the exhibit. The uniform is mainly white with bell-bottom trousers, a shirt with a square collar, lanyard and whistle. The ghost wanders around the exhibits and has spoken to people on more than one occasion. When they found out exactly who or what they've been talking to, they said he was a very polite, quiet man. But he isn't the only ghost in the building. There are no less than 7 others who are reported by psychics and mediums to live in the dormitory at the top of the building above the museum. Several names have been given by the mediums, and they tally with records of the time. 5 of the men have been identified, but the 2 women detected there and with them are unknown. Perhaps they were from the music hall when it burnt down. Again, a story I haven't read. Read the book to find out more. Another story from the same premises arises from a charity ghost hunt that took place when a group of friends stayed overnight in the building. One of the group decided she wanted some sleep and found a quiet corner to rest in, a room that had been a police cell in days gone by. She was settling down to rest when she heard footsteps outside the cell. Footsteps that came from the outside of the building where there used to be an old parade ground and prisoner exercise yard. She could hear the gravel moving under the feet for about an hour. Her friend who came to wake her found her wide awake and staring at the back of the wall of the cell she was in. She couldn't remember exactly what was behind this wall and couldn't take a look as the windows were blacked out. When the sun rose, they went out to look and found that a small building had been added over on the courtyard. It was built in the 1940s to house equipment. Prisoners by this time apparently were not held at the station at all, and so the courtyard was used for other things. She put her experience down to a ghostly echo from the time prisoners were given air and exercise in this courtyard outside the cell wall. An investigation set up by the Sheffield Paranormal Society in 2006 found several anomalies in the building: temperature, sound, scents and noises. But one of them that caught my attention was given to me by the photographer who furnished most of the modern photographs in this book. He told me of this experience on the ghost hunt. I was sitting up alone at the top of the building where the old firemen's beds were on a vigil, just waiting for anything unusual to happen. There were no sounds or movements out of the ordinary, but suddenly there was a sharp smell of sulphur that hung around for at least a minute, like an old match had been struck to light a pipe. The scent was out of place, as the entire building is a smoke-free zone, and none of the other ghost hunters smoked. He's not the only person to report the scent of sulphur in the building, as if someone had just lit a match and waved it out quickly. Several other visitors have smelled the same thing over the years. Whether it's an old fireman or a policeman having a crafty smoke, we'll never know. But the evidence around for your nose is keen enough to catch it.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, that, because as I understand it, sulphur smells like egg. Like,
It's horrible. Sulphur's a horrible smell.
so not like a match at all.
Old matches use sulphur.
Didn't know that.
But
It's a learning day.
Well, old matches weren't. You're thinking of modern safety matches, which can only be used on the accompanying strip. Original matches just went on, got just sparks. That's why you could light them off anything. You see them in cartoons lighting them off their
Beard.
manly chins.
I've got one.
No.
Okay, so this is Kim Jong Funk, who has shared this one on Reddit. When I was in elementary school, I shared a queen-size bed with my older sister and our family dog, a mutt that looked like a short-haired lassie. She would sleep at the foot of our bed every night. When I was about 6, I woke up one night around midnight and saw a dark figure at the foot of the bed. The figure was entirely in black, and it didn't have eyes or a face. Nice. I tried to wake my sister up, but she rolled over to go back to sleep. My sister must have accidentally kicked the dog, because the dog woke up and raised her head and started growling at the figure at the foot of the bed. The growling then woke my sister up, and she saw the figure and started screaming. When my parents came into the room and turned the light on, there was nothing there. To this day, both my sister and I are adamant that we saw a ghost or some sort of demon in our room. We know we aren't crazy because the dog saw it too.
I've got one. Last night, a friend rushed me out of the house to catch the opening act at a local bar's music night. After a few drinks, I realised my phone wasn't in my pocket. I checked the table we were sitting at, the bar, the bathrooms, and after no luck, I used my friend's phone to call mine. After 2 rings, someone answered, gave a low, raspy giggle and hung up. They didn't answer again. I eventually gave it up as a lost cause and headed home. I found my phone laying on my nightstand, right where I left it.
That's not a nice one. That's not a nice one.
So here's one. Cops of Reddit have been asked the question, what has been the creepiest call you've ever responded to and what happened? So 911 dispatcher reporting in, received a call from an elderly lady who had trouble breathing. I had taken several calls from her and her husband in the past, so I recognised her voice. I dispatched an ambulance to her residence and held her on the line, trying to keep her calm while the ambulance was on the way. Ambulance advised that they would be 15 minutes. She lived in a very rural part of the city. I'm talking to her, asking about her husband and how he was doing, and just making small talk with her. The ambulance calls in and advises they are on scene, and I let them know that she is in severe respiratory distress, and I still had her on the line. I let her know the ambulance is coming to the door and go and answer the door, and she's okay. She says okay and hangs up. Pretty normal, yeah. Well, here's where it gets weird. The EMT and paramedic on scene call back about a minute later and advise that no one is answering the door. We have a sheriff unit who was in the area pulling up on the scene about that time. The sheriff unit confirmed the address and advised he is reaching the door to make access to the PT.5 to the PT. 5 minutes go by and the paramedic on scene radios in asking who the caller was. I advise it was the elderly female who lived at the residence. He tells me that he's going to call in and needs to speak with the supervisor on shift. We get him over to the supervisor and the supervisor confirms the information that I gave him and asks what's going on. Apparently the elderly female had been dead for a while and was already in full rigor mortis. They thought I was wrong on the caller, but the other dispatchers played it back and confirmed that it was the female who called. The ambulance transferred to the hospital and we got the same calls and disbelief from the doctors. So I took a call from a ghost.
I've just read this one. This is quite creepy. Every time the clock strikes 12, I hear an extra tick from the clock. I thought it was my imagination at first, until I saw a long, thinned hand reach out from behind the clock and tap its long nails on the wall.
So a few years ago I was volunteering with the city council, helping people clean their houses after the neighbourhood I lived in had been flooded. One house belonged to a Chinese couple who ran the local convenience store. They had asked our crew to help remove water-damaged carpets from the ground floor rooms of the house so it could be thrown away. As we were removing this carpet, we realised that it ran in one piece under a closed door and into a locked room. So we asked the lady of the house if she wanted us to cut it off at the door and leave whatever it was locked in the room behind, or if she wanted to open the room and have us remove the carpet in there also. She responded, I'll check with my husband, see what he wants to do. That's his special room. This led to some nervously puzzled looks from our crew. What does a middle-aged Chinese man who owns a convenience store keep in his special room? Eventually the wife came back with a set of keys and told us that we could remove the carpet in the room, and she unlocked the door. We all crowded around as the door opened to reveal a room with carpet up the walls, a mirror ball on the ceiling, a stage at one end with a PA standard sound system, a projector, and in the corner just about the fanciest karaoke machine I've ever seen. Special room indeed.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's possibly my favourite one.
Yeah, because he's not creepy.
Yeah, no matter you because you think it's going to be great, he's completely not. I like that.
Answers the question perfectly. What does a middle-aged Chinese man keep in his special room? Clearly, it's a karaoke machine.
Well, nothing but a stereotype sometimes, but are they?
Any more for any more?
That's a good one to finish
yes,
on.
Yes, a good one to finish on. Yeah.
Thank you very much. You've been great. We've been Captain Night. Good night.